66 million years ago, Earth followed a different rhythm. Dinosaurs moved across every continent. Massive herbivores shaped landscapes. Large predators dominated food chains. For millions of years, their presence felt permanent. Nothing on land rivaled them in size. Nothing challenged their dominance. Sunrise followed sunrise over a planet ruled by scaled giants. Then something interrupted that rhythm. An asteroid roughly 10 kilometers wide struck what is now Mexico. The impact reshaped the planet's surface and atmosphere in ways that unfolded far beyond the crater itself. Light dimmed, temperatures shifted, ecosystems destabilized. In the geological record, the boundary is sharp. Below it, dinosaurs. Above it, absence. Around 75% of species disappeared. Every non-avian dinosaur was gone. What had defined life on land for over 160 million years ended in a short span of time, and yet life did not end. Somewhere in that darkness, small mammals survived, quiet, hidden, waiting, which raises the deeper questions. How did these small creatures endure when giants vanished? What allowed them to survive conditions that erased so much else? How quickly did the world begin to change after that long night? And what did the first sunrise of the new age truly reveal? Tonight, we step into the fragile dawn that followed extinction. But before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight, and what time is it there? Your comments are one of my favorite parts of this sleepy little community. And if you're enjoying this space, it would mean so much if you tapped like or subscribed. For those already part of our calm little corner of science, thank you for making this journey possible. Now take a deep breath, let it go, and together we follow the small footsteps that would change the planet forever. Long before the sky dimmed and forests fell silent, another lineage had already learned to move quietly through a world ruled by giants. Their story began more than 200 million years earlier, in the shadows of towering bodies and heavy footsteps. They did not command open plains or dominate horizons. They moved low to the ground, close to leaf litter and soil, navigating a landscape where caution shaped every instinct. Most were small, many no larger than modern rats. Their size was not a flaw, but a strategy. Compact bodies required less food, less territory, less attention. In a world filled with vast herbivores and formidable predators, remaining unnoticed was its own kind of strength. Their limbs were often tucked close to their bodies, built for quick darts into cover rather than long pursuits across open ground. Fur covered their skin, a fine insulation against fluctuating temperatures. Unlike reptiles that relied heavily on external warmth, these early mammals generated heat within. Warm blood allowed activity during cooler hours. When larger reptiles slowed, night offered opportunity. Under cover of darkness, while dominant creatures rested, small mammals foraged among roots and fallen branches. Insects, seeds, and tiny vertebrates formed varied diets, encouraging flexible teeth and adaptable jaws. Within their bodies, quiet innovations unfolded. Mammary glands nourished their young with milk, freeing reproduction from total dependence on external food sources at the earliest stages of life. Parental care extended beyond the laying of eggs or abandonment of offspring. Young were guarded, warmed, fed. Survival was no longer left entirely to chance. Many species retreated underground. Burrows sheltered them from predators and extreme weather, buffering heat and cold alike. Beneath the surface, temperature remained more stable, seasons softened by layers of soil. These hidden networks became refuges long before catastrophe ever arrived. Digging limbs and sensitive whiskers turned darkness into familiar terrain. Their senses sharpened in confined spaces. Hearing grew acute, aided by delicate middle ear bones refined over time. Smell guided them through night air and narrow tunnels. Vision adapted to low light, trading wide daylight clarity for sensitivity and shadow. Each adjustment favored endurance over spectacle. For over 150 million years, these mammals coexisted with dinosaurs. They did not challenge reptilian dominance, they endured it. Evolution favored flexibility, small litters raised carefully, diets broad enough to shift with changing vegetation. Their bodies carried potential not yet realized, traits assembled slowly across immense spans of time. By the end of the Cretaceous, they were already diverse, already experimenting with form within modest limits. Their size remained small, yet their physiology held quiet advantages. When environments cooled or food grew scarce, warm blood and adaptable feeding strategies offered resilience. When danger loomed, burrows and night concealed them. They had never ruled the planet. They had simply persisted, generation after generation, refining survival in a crowded world. In the layers of rock that follow the Great Boundary, change unfolds with unusual speed. Paleocene sediments, once quiet and sparse, begin to fill with variety. Within 1 to 5 million years, fossils reveal a branching pattern that seems almost restless. Lineages that had remained small and constrained for millions of years begin to expand into forms not seen before. Body sizes increase first in subtle increments, then with growing boldness. Creatures once light enough to fit in a human hand grow into animals the size of foxes, then dogs, then larger still. Skeletal proportions shift as weight redistributes across stronger limbs. Spines lengthen and stiffen to support heavier frames. The ground itself now carries mammals of noticeable presence. Teeth record much of this transformation. Molars become broader in some groups, ridged for grinding leaves and fruit. In others, they sharpen into slicing edges suited for flesh. Incisors adapt for gnawing, premolars thicken and reshape. Each alteration reflects a change in diet, and each change in diet reflects a widening of opportunity. Where once they fed cautiously on insects and scattered seeds, many now explore roots, foliage, carrion, and prey. Limbs follow the same pattern of innovation. Some mammals lengthen their legs, joints angling for speed and open terrain. Others develop flexible ankles and grasping digits suited for climbing in newly recovering forests. Shoulder blades shift position, allowing a greater range of motion. Hips deepen to support powerful strides. The skeleton becomes an experimental framework, testing balance, leverage, and endurance. This diversification does not unfold evenly across every lineage. Certain branches flourish briefly and fade, leaving behind only fragments and sediment. Others persist and radiate further. What unites them is the pace. In geological terms, 1 to 5 million years is a brief interval, a narrow band in stone. Yet within that band, mammalian diversity multiplies. The disappearance of dominant reptiles had left ecological niches unfilled. Large herbivore roles stood open, predator positions waited without occupants, arboreal spaces, burrowing networks, shoreline margins, and inland plains all offered conditions without former competitors. Mammals did not expand into a vacuum of lifelessness, but into landscapes where pressures had shifted and boundaries had loosened. Endothermy provided steady activity across fluctuating temperatures. Differentiated teeth allowed precise food processing. Extended parental care supported higher juvenile survival. These traits, assembled long before, now express themselves under new circumstances. Evolution appears accelerated, not because its mechanisms changed, but because opportunity magnified their effects. In these early Paleocene communities, diversity becomes visible in every stratum. Small insectivores still persist, yet beside them move heavier browsers and early carnivores. The quiet survivors of the Cretaceous become architects of an emerging world, their forms adjusting generation by generation. Over a span brief in stone, yet vast in lived time, the outline of a new terrestrial order takes shape. Mass accumulates quietly in the fossil record. Bones that once fit easily within a palm begin to lengthen and thicken, joints broadening, muscle attachments deepening. Within 10 million years of the boundary, certain mammals carry a presence that would have been unimaginable in their earlier forms. Their skeletons speak of weight supported confidently on sturdy limbs, of bodies no longer confined to the margins of undergrowth. Among the most prominent are the pantodonts, heavy built herbivores with sprawling frames and strong columned legs. Their skulls widen to house molars, suited for crushing vegetation, enamel ridged and reinforced. In floodplains and forest clearings, these animals browse on leaves and soft shoots, shaping plant communities simply by feeding. Alongside them appear early hoofed mammals, the first outlines of lineages that will later diversify into horses, deer, and many others. Their digits begin to concentrate weight toward strengthened toes, an early step toward efficient movement across varied ground. Growth in size demands coordinated change. Rib cages expand to shelter larger lungs and hearts capable of sustaining heavier bodies. Vertebrae thicken, distributing strain through bone and cartilage. Limbs align more directly beneath the torso, shifting from the semi sprawled posture of some early mammals toward more upright stances. Locomotion becomes steady, deliberate, capable of covering wider ranges in search of foliage. As plant eaters enlarge, so do those that follow them. Early mammalian predators increase in size, their jaws reinforced for stronger bites. Teeth sharpen and elongate into efficient slicing blades. Carnivory, once limited to smaller prey, scales upward to match the expanding herbivore biomass. A new dynamic settles into recovering ecosystems, herbivores dispersing energy from plants, predators redistributing it through pursuit and consumption. These transformations ripple outward through entire communities. Larger mammals disturb soil as they move, alter seed distribution, open pathways through vegetation. Streams shift under the pressure of hooves and heavy steps. Plant growth responds to browsing patterns, some species thriving under trimming, others retreating. Interactions knit together into food webs that resemble familiar structures, though assembled from different cast members. The pace remains swift in geological perspective. 10 million years marks a brief chapter in Earth's long chronicle, yet within it, terrestrial landscapes shift from reptile dominated to mammal structured. Reptiles continue to occupy important roles, but the largest bodies on land increasingly bear fur rather than scales. Warm blood and parental investment support sustained growth, enabling young mammals to mature into impressive sizes under stable climates of the early Paleocene and Eocene. By the end of this interval, the silhouette of land life has altered noticeably. Forest edges host bulky browsers, riverbanks record the tracks of hoofed pioneers, and predators patrol with heightened sensory acuity. The transformation is not abrupt or theatrical. It unfolds layer by layer in sediment, bone by bone in stone, until the balance of presence tilts, and the age of giant mammals stands clearly etched across the land. Claws press into damp soil at the edge of a clearing, leaving narrow impressions that follow no reptilian pattern. The stride is more aligned, the weight carried beneath the body rather than sprawling outward. A new kind of hunter moves through the early Paleocene landscapes, not enormous, yet deliberate, guided by senses attuned to subtle movement. In the wake of expanding herbivore populations, mammalian carnivores begin to define their own presence. Among the most prominent are the creodonts, a diverse group that comes to dominate early mammal carnivory. Their skulls elongate, jaws deep and reinforced, housing teeth specialized for slicing rather than crushing. The carnassial blades, formed from modified molars, shear flesh efficiently, closing with a scissor-like precision. This adaptation marks a decisive shift toward dedicated meat consumption, separating these predators from the generalized diets of their smaller ancestors. Their bodies balance strength with mobility. Limbs grow proportionally longer, paws capable of gripping uneven ground, shoulders rotating with a range that supports both ambush and pursuit. Some creodonts remain compact, stalking within dense vegetation. Others increase in size, capable of confronting prey nearly their own mass. Muscle attachments on fossilized bones reveal the steady accumulation of power, particularly in the neck and forelimbs, where control over struggling prey becomes essential. Neurological capacity also expands during this period. Compared to many reptiles that preceded them in similar ecological roles, these early mammalian predators possess relatively larger brains in proportion to body size. Endocasts of cranial cavities suggest enhanced regions associated with smell and coordination. Olfactory bulbs enlarge, interpreting faint scent trails across complex terrain. Greater neural integration allows more flexible responses to shifting conditions, adapting hunting strategies to varied prey and environments. Warm blood supports sustained activity beyond the narrow temperature windows of ectothermic hunters. Creodonts patrol during cooler hours, maintaining endurance across longer distances. In temperate climates that fluctuate between warmth and chill, this metabolic stability offers an advantage, extending the hours available for foraging and territorial defense. Predation returns fully to terrestrial ecosystems, yet its rhythm has altered. Rather than relying solely on bursts of speed under intense sunlight, these mammals incorporate stealth, scent tracking, and persistent pursuit. Parental care continues to influence behavior, with young learning through extended association rather than immediate independence. Social structures vary, some likely solitary, others perhaps tolerating limited cooperation. Across floodplains, wooded corridors, and upland slopes, the balance between hunter and herbivore stabilizes into dynamic equilibrium. Carcasses recycle nutrients into soil and waterways. Prey species evolve heightened awareness, refining speed and defensive traits in response. The dialogue between predator and prey resumes under fur and warm breath. The land now carries carnivores, whose lineage emerged quietly from earlier shadows, shaped by inherited traits and newly realized potential. In bone and tooth, the evidence remains, recording a chapter when mammalian hunters claimed their place in the unfolding order of life. Across much of the early Paleocene, green returned not as scattered patches but as continuity. Warmth settled over continents, steady and sustained, allowing vegetation to spread without the interruption of deep cold. Broadleaf trees formed layered canopies, their crowns interlocking high above the ground. Beneath them grew shrubs, ferns, and young saplings, weaving together into a textured world of stems and leaves. Even at high latitudes, where later ages would bring ice, forests thrived under mild conditions. This climate, often described through pollen grains and fossilized leaves, reveals tropical and subtropical plants extending far beyond their modern ranges. Palms appear in sediments near what are now temperate zones. Growth rings in ancient wood suggest seasons that were gentle rather than extreme. With little frost to halt development, ecosystems accumulated biomass year after year, building dense habitats that filtered light into mottled patterns below. Within these forests, movement required adaptation. Large open spaces were rare, replaced by trunks, roots, and tangled understory. Mammals navigating this environment benefited from agility more than sheer speed. Flexible ankles allowed quick pivots around obstacles. Curved claws improved grip on bark. Tails lengthened in some lineages, aiding balance during climbs and leaps between branches. Arboreal lifestyles began to expand as food resources accumulated above the forest floor. Fruits, seeds, and insects populated the canopy, creating vertical layers of opportunity. Small mammals that could ascend trunks gained access to niches unavailable to purely terrestrial forms. Over time, shoulder joints became more mobile, forelimbs capable of rotation that supported grasping and suspension. Digits differentiated further, some beginning to oppose others in tentative grips around slender branches. Dense vegetation also influenced sensory systems. Vision adapted to shifting light and shade. Depth perception gained importance in navigating three-dimensional spaces. Hearing carried through foliage, alerting animals to rustling movement nearby. Scent marked territories in complex environments where visual cues were often obscured. Forests did not merely shelter life, they guided its direction. High productivity supported larger herbivores, whose browsing shaped tree regeneration and plant composition. Predators followed prey along narrow pathways between roots and trunks. Seed dispersal spread certain plant species widely, entwining animal and plant evolution into shared trajectories. In these layered ecosystems, experimentation flourished quietly. Variations in limb length, tooth form, and body size encountered immediate feedback from the environment. Those suited to climbing thrived among branches. Others specialized on forest floors, rich with leaf litter and invertebrates. The vertical complexity of forests created multiple stages upon which natural selection acted simultaneously. The early Paleocene world, wrapped in warmth and greenery, provided continuity rather than isolation. Habitats connected across continents through similar climates, allowing lineages to spread and diversify. Within this expansive canopy, mammals refined abilities that would influence their descendants for millions of years. The forest became not only a habitat but a shaping force, steady in its guidance and vast in its reach. Around 55 million years ago, subtle alterations appear in the fossil record, small changes in skull and limb that signal a different direction. In sediments from the early Eocene, delicate bones emerge, belonging to creatures that moved with unusual precision among branches. These are the first true primates, not yet anything close to later apes or humans, but already distinct in ways that matter. Their skulls shorten slightly at the snout, while the orbits of the eyes rotate forward. Instead of gazing outward to either side, vision begins to overlap. Forward-facing eyes create depth perception, an essential guide in a three-dimensional world of trunks and suspended pathways. Judging distance becomes more exact, allowing careful leaps between branches where miscalculation carries consequence. Hands and feet change in quiet coordination with this new visual emphasis. Fingers lengthen and become more flexible, capable of curling securely around narrow supports. In many early primates, claws recede and flatten into nails, broad surfaces that allow tactile pads to press directly against bark. The sense of touch refines, textured surfaces, translated into nuanced signals, carried to expanding neural centers. Those neural centers grow steadily. Brain size increases relative to overall body mass, particularly in regions associated with visual processing and coordination. Within their cranial cavities, impressions suggest greater integration between sight, balance, and movement. As they navigate complex canopies, memory and spatial awareness take on heightened importance. Pathways through interlaced branches demand recognition and recall. Dietary patterns shift alongside anatomy. Many early primates feed on fruits, young leaves, and insects located in the upper layers of forest vegetation. Color vision likely improves in certain lineages, supporting the detection of ripe fruit against foliage. Fine motor control assists in plucking and manipulating food items that smaller insectivores might simply snap up. Their bodies remain modest in size, preserving agility among thin branches. Flexible shoulders and mobile wrists grant fluid motion during climbing. Hind limbs coordinate with forelimbs in vertical ascent, while tails, in several species, provide balance along precarious perches. Life in the canopy rewards awareness and delicate precision more than speed on open ground. Within these adaptations lies a gentle but meaningful shift. Enhanced vision, sensitive touch, and larger brains foster behaviors that rely on interpretation rather than reflex alone. Social interactions likely grow more intricate as well, with extended maternal care offering opportunities for learning through observation. Forests continue to shape these developments, their layered architecture acting as both habitat and teacher. Over successive generations, primates refine traits that distinguish them from other arboreal mammals. The transformation is incremental, spread across many lineages and landscapes, yet it marks the beginning of a trajectory toward greater cognitive complexity. In the quiet canopy of early Eocene woodlands, a lineage settles into an evolutionary path defined not by size or strength, but by perception, coordination, and the gradual deepening of awareness. A thin band of clay and altered isotopes marks a brief surge of warmth unlike anything in the surrounding layers. Around 56 million years ago, the Paleocene Eocene Thermal Maximum unfolds in sediment and chemistry, recorded in the ratio of carbon preserved within ancient shells and soils. The signal indicates a massive release of carbon into the atmosphere and oceans, delivered over a span measured in thousands of years rather than millions. Temperatures rise rapidly on a global scale, reshaping climates across continents. Oceans absorb much of this carbon, becoming more acidic. On land, average temperatures climb by several degrees Celsius, pushing subtropical conditions into higher latitudes. Rainfall patterns shift, some regions growing wetter while others experience drying cycles. The warmth is not fleeting in ecological terms. It persists long enough to disrupt established communities and alter the pace of biological change. Mammals respond in measurable ways. Fossil measurements reveal a temporary reduction in body size across multiple lineages, including early horses and primate relatives. Smaller bodies dissipate heat more efficiently, requiring less water and fewer resources under stressed conditions. Teeth and limb bones from this interval show subtle but consistent scaling downward, a pattern mirrored on separate continents. The change is gradual yet widespread, reflecting selection pressures tied to temperature and resource availability. As climates transform, movement increases. Land bridges between continents, exposed by lower sea levels at certain intervals, allow dispersal between North America, Europe, and Asia. Mammalian groups appear almost simultaneously in distant regions, suggesting waves of migration facilitated by shifting habitats. Species adapt to new plant communities and altered seasonality, diversifying as they track favorable conditions across expanding ranges. Plant life adjusts in parallel. Some forests retract under heat stress, replaced by vegetation better suited to warmth. Insects expand their distributions, influencing food sources for small mammals and primates. Predators shift territories following prey that migrate in search of cooler refuges or reliable water sources. Food webs stretch and reorganize in response to environmental instability. The carbon cycle itself continues to interact with life. Increased weathering of rocks gradually draws carbon back from the atmosphere, a slow geological feedback that eventually cools the planet. Over approximately 100,000 to 200,000 years, temperatures stabilize toward previous levels. Mammalian body sizes, having contracted during peak warmth, begin to increase again in subsequent strata. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum stands as a concentrated interval of climatic acceleration, compressing evolutionary pressures into a narrow band of time. Mammals endure by adjusting physiology, range, and behavior in coordination with environmental shifts. Within this heated chapter, adaptability becomes visible not only in bone, but in geographic spread, reinforcing a pattern of resilience under rapid change. Along ancient shorelines where rivers met shallow seas, certain hoofed mammals began to linger at the water's edge. Their tracks pressed into mud beside tidal flats, impressions later sealed beneath layers of sediment. These animals were not yet creatures of open ocean. They were terrestrial hunters and foragers, drawn toward aquatic margins where fish, invertebrates, and carrion offered reliable nourishment. One of the earliest known among them is Pakicetus. Its skeleton reveals a body built largely for land, long legs supporting its weight, a pelvis firmly attached to the spine. Yet, within the dense bone of its ear lies a feature unmistakably linked to whales, a thickened auditory structure that responds uniquely to underwater sound. Pakicetus likely moved between riverbanks and shallow streams, its senses gradually adapting to a world where sound traveled differently through water. A few million years later, Ambulocetus appears in the fossil record, its name reflecting a walking whale. Its limbs remain strong and weight-bearing, but the proportions suggest powerful strokes against resistance. Hind legs broaden, feet flatten, and a flexible spine allows undulating movement similar to that of modern otters or crocodiles. Ambulocetus could still haul its body onto land, yet much of its hunting likely occurred in rivers and coastal shallows. Over successive generations, anatomical shifts accumulate. The pelvis detaches from the rigid connection to the spine, reducing the role of hind limbs in locomotion. Forelimbs transform, joints stiffening as elongated digits become encased within flippers. Vertebrae in the tail enlarge, supporting horizontal flukes that provide propulsion through powerful up and down motions. Bone density adjusts, balancing buoyancy and stability in open water. Breathing structures migrate as well. Nostrils, once positioned at the tip of a long snout, gradually shift backward along the skull. In intermediate fossils, the opening appears midway between nose and crown. Eventually, it settles atop the head, forming a blowhole that allows efficient respiration at the surface without fully exposing the body. The transition reflects continuous refinement rather than abrupt redesign. Teeth and feeding strategies diversify during this aquatic commitment. Some early whales retain varied dentition for grasping slippery prey. Others begin moving toward filtration, a path that much later yields baleen whales. Inner ears adapt to detect directional sound underwater, compensating for the loss of airborne hearing once essential on land. These changes unfold across millions of years, charting a gradual surrender of terrestrial dominance for marine mastery. By the late Eocene, fully aquatic whales inhabit coastal and open ocean environments, bodies streamlined and limbs redefined. A lineage that once stepped lightly along forest floors now navigates immense water columns with confident propulsion. The return to the sea completes a remarkable cycle, mammals re entering marine ecosystems long after distant reptilian ancestors had ruled them. The ocean, expansive and deep, becomes once again a domain shaped by warm blood and parental care, a different expression of mammalian potential beneath shifting tides. As coastal waters welcomed returning lineages, the air above forests began to fill with a different experiment. In the early Eocene, small mammals with elongated fingers and delicate bones appear in the fossil record, their proportions unlike any ground dwelling relative. Membranes stretch between lengthened digits, forming broad surfaces capable of catching and shaping moving air. These are the earliest bats, the only mammals to achieve powered flight through the continuous beating of wings. Their forelimbs transform into aerodynamic frameworks. Each finger, except the thumb, extends dramatically, supporting thin skin that connects to the body and often to the hind limbs. The shoulder girdle strengthens to endure repeated strokes, while chest muscles enlarge to drive sustained flapping. Lightweight skeletons reduce mass without sacrificing structural integrity, hollowed in places yet reinforced where forces concentrate. Flight alters more than posture, it reshapes daily rhythms. Many early bats take to the sky after sunset, when temperatures cool and insects rise in dense swarms. Night air becomes a corridor rich with nourishment. In darkness, visual cues diminish, yet bats compensate through another innovation that refines their survival. Echolocation emerges, allowing individuals to emit high-frequency sounds and interpret returning echoes. Subtle differences in timing and intensity reveal obstacles and prey with remarkable precision. The anatomical evidence suggests that this sensory system evolves alongside flight. Enlarged cochleae within the inner ear accommodate rapid sound processing, while nasal or oral structures specialize in producing ultrasonic pulses. The brain integrates auditory information at high speed, constructing spatial maps invisible to other animals. Wings maneuver through cluttered environments, guided by sound as much as sight. Nocturnal hunting in the air reduces competition with diurnal birds and terrestrial predators. Moths, beetles, and other flying insects become primary prey, their movements tracked in mid-flight. Some bat lineages diversify further, adopting varied diets that include fruit, nectar, and even small vertebrates, but insectivory anchors the earliest branches. Energy demands of flight require efficient metabolism. Endothermy, already established in mammals, supports sustained muscle activity during long aerial forays. Hearts pump rapidly, lungs exchange gases across extensive surfaces, and fuel is drawn from fat reserves accumulated during active periods. Roosting behavior balances these expenditures, with colonies gathering in caves, hollow trees, or sheltered crevices to conserve warmth and exchange social cues. In the twilight canopy, bats trace arcs above treetops and along rivers, occupying a vertical niche few mammals had entered before. Their silhouettes are slight, yet their impact on ecosystems is substantial. Pollination, seed dispersal, and insect population control weave them into broader ecological networks. The sky, once reserved for birds and insects, now carries warm-blooded wings beating steadily through evening air. Broad floodplains begin to open between forests, their soils periodically renewed by rivers that wander and recede. In these expanding spaces, new forms step lightly over soft ground, their toes narrowing and strengthening as weight shifts toward the tips. Among them are the early horses, small at first, no larger than modern dogs, moving with quick, measured strides across patchy clearings. Their limbs lengthen gradually, bones aligning to favor forward motion rather than lateral sway. These early equids still browse on leaves and tender shoots, yet their teeth reveal subtle preparation for change. Molars develop ridges capable of processing tougher vegetation. Enamel thickens incrementally, anticipating the abrasive silica that grasses will later introduce. Over successive generations, the digestive tract adapts as well, extending and compartmentalizing to extract nutrients from fibrous plants. Fermentation in enlarged gut chambers becomes increasingly efficient, allowing sustained feeding in open terrain. Alongside them move early deer, ancestors, and other ungulates, bodies streamlined, hooves cloven or singular depending on lineage. Their skeletal frames balance speed with endurance, shoulders and hips arranged to transmit force smoothly through each stride. As open habitats widen, mobility becomes an asset not only for feeding but also for vigilance. Eyes positioned slightly higher on the skull, expanding peripheral awareness across exposed ground. Feeding strategies diversify as landscapes shift. Some ungulates retain browsing habits within woodland edges, selecting shrubs and low branches. Others experiment with grazing as grasses begin their steady expansion. Although vast grasslands will not dominate until later epochs, the groundwork is set in these early communities. Dental crowns grow higher in certain species, a response to wear caused by tougher diets and wind-blown grit. Digestive systems follow this trajectory. Multi-chambered stomachs in some groups allow microbial partners to break down cellulose efficiently, converting coarse plant matter into usable energy. In others, elongated intestines perform similar work through extended fermentation. These internal adjustments are not visible at a glance, yet they underpin the ability of hoofed mammals to occupy niches that rely on abundant but challenging food sources. Behavior evolves in quiet coordination. Herds begin to form, loose at first, small clusters that move together across open ground. Collective vigilance reduces individual risk. Social bonds develop through proximity and synchronized movement, shaping communication signals expressed through posture, scent, and subtle vocalizations. Young animals learn migration routes and feeding grounds by following adults across seasonal cycles. Predators remain present, selecting the slow or isolated, reinforcing the advantage of group living and speed. As more land becomes intermittently open, hoofed mammals refine their adaptations further. What begins as scattered populations in fragmented clearings gradually organizes into expansive communities, capable of traversing wide stretches of terrain. In this shifting balance between forest and field, hoofed mammals establish foundations for later dominance. Their bodies, diets, and social patterns align with landscapes that are widening, preparing them for horizons that continue to unfold beyond the tree line. Wind moves differently across open country. It no longer tangles only in branches, but travels low and steady, bending narrow blades in coordinated waves. During the Miocene, vast stretches of forest retreat in many regions, replaced by expanding grasslands that alter both horizon and habit. This transformation unfolds over millions of years, guided by gradual cooling, drying trends, and shifts in atmospheric circulation. Grasses, once limited to scattered patches, spread widely across continents. Unlike many earlier plants, grasses grow from their base rather than from tips alone. When cropped, they regenerate quickly, creating a renewable food source for animals able to process their tough fibers. Their tissues contain silica particles that wear down teeth, introducing a new challenge for herbivores. Those unable to adapt decline, while others respond through subtle modifications that accumulate across generations. Teeth change first in visible ways. Molars become high-crowned, their enamel extending farther above the gum line to withstand constant abrasion. Complex ridges develop across chewing surfaces, creating grinding patterns suited for shredding fibrous blades. This dental architecture allows mammals to process grasses efficiently without losing functional teeth too rapidly. Fossil jaws from the Miocene display these adaptations clearly, enamel gleaming with layered resilience. As grasslands expand, the spatial arrangement of food shifts. Instead of browsing within sheltered woodlands, herbivores traverse wide areas in search of fresh growth. Open terrain favors those capable of sustained movement. Limbs lengthen further, bones narrowing yet strengthening to reduce weight while preserving durability. Toes consolidate into hooves optimized for forward thrust, minimizing contact with uneven ground and maximizing stride efficiency. Speed becomes intertwined with survival. In open landscapes, concealment is limited, and distance must compensate for exposure. Musculature aligns along elongated limbs, storing and releasing energy with each step. Ligaments act like tensioned cords, improving endurance over extended runs. Herds move across plains in coordinated motion, covering considerable ground in response to seasonal rainfall and shifting pastures. Predators adjust in tandem. Carnivores refine their own limbs for pursuit, shoulder joints stabilizing for forward propulsion rather than grappling alone. The dynamic between hunter and hunted becomes defined by acceleration and stamina across open ground. This feedback reinforces selection for swiftness on both sides, shaping body plans that favor lean frames and powerful hindquarters. Grasslands also influence atmospheric chemistry. Widespread photosynthesis draws down carbon dioxide, contributing gradually to global cooling trends. Root systems stabilize soil, while seasonal fires, fueled by dry vegetation, recycle nutrients and maintain open habitats. These recurring burns limit tree regrowth, reinforcing the dominance of grasses over vast tracts of land. Across continents, from Africa to North America and Eurasia, the age of runners emerges. Mammals built for long distances define the silhouette of Miocene ecosystems. Their hooves strike firm ground beneath expansive skies, embodying a new relationship between body and landscape, shaped by the quiet persistence of grass. Teeth lengthen into crescents of enamel, curving beyond the lower jaw in precise arcs. In Miocene and later strata, skulls emerge, bearing sabers that once flashed through tall grass and open woodland. Saber-toothed cats, belonging to several distinct lineages, refine a predatory design built for controlled power rather than simple speed. Their forelimbs thicken, shoulders broaden, and retractable claws anchor struggling prey. The elongated canines, fragile if misused, demand careful placement, guiding a hunting style that relies on grappling strength and calculated strikes. Across the same landscapes, early canids develop a different approach. Their bodies stretch into streamlined frames, limbs aligned for distance and persistence. Jaws, though lacking exaggerated fangs, carry teeth arranged for slicing and crushing. Nasal passages enlarge, supporting an acute sense of smell capable of tracing scent across miles of open terrain. Endurance, rather than ambush alone, becomes their defining trait. As grasslands expand and ungulate herds traverse wider ranges, predators respond to the mobility of their prey. Speed increases in measured increments. Leg bones elongate, joints stabilize, and musculature reorganizes to maximize forward thrust. Ligaments store elastic energy with each stride, allowing bursts of acceleration followed by sustained pursuit. Predation in open country becomes a contest of stamina and coordination. Social cooperation grows more pronounced in certain carnivorous lineages. Fossil assemblages and comparative anatomy suggest pack structures in early canids, with groups working together to isolate and exhaust larger herbivores. Communication refines through posture, vocalization, and scent marking. Cooperative strategies allow access to prey that might overpower a solitary hunter, reinforcing group cohesion and shared territory. Saber-toothed cats, though often imagined as solitary, also display variations in social tolerance across species. Some may have hunted alone, relying on ambush near wooded edges, while others likely tolerated close association during feeding. Regardless of strategy, the balance between predator and prey tightens. Herbivores respond with greater vigilance, sharper hearing, and enhanced flight responses. Selection pressures circulate between them in continuous exchange. Brain size continues to matter. Carnivores navigating cooperative hunts require memory of terrain, awareness of pack position, and timing that aligns with others. Neural capacity supports not only coordination but also adaptability when hunts fail or conditions change. Young predators learn through extended association, absorbing techniques that improve survival over successive generations. By this stage, mammals occupy both sides of the ecological equation. Hoofed herbivores dominate vast grazing systems, while mammalian carnivores govern pursuit and ambush. The arms race does not resolve into a single victor, but into ongoing refinement, each lineage shaping the evolution of the other. Across continents, the interplay stabilizes into dynamic equilibrium. Mammals now define the structure of terrestrial ecosystems at every level, from grazing fields to predatory corridors. Tooth and limb, brain and behavior all contribute to a landscape where warm-blooded species command both nourishment and negotiation within the cycles of life and death. Temperature begins to decline in long, uneven breaths. Over millions of years, continental positions and shifting ocean currents guide Earth toward cooler conditions. By the late Cenozoic, polar ice expands and retreats in repeating rhythms, glacial cycles paced by subtle variations in Earth's orbit and tilt. Vast ice sheets advance across northern continents, then withdraw, leaving behind carved valleys, scattered boulders, and broad plains of sediment. Within these oscillating climates, mammalian lineages adapt in scale and insulation. Grasslands and steppe regions stretch beneath cold skies, supporting herds capable of enduring extended winters. Among them move mammoths, their silhouettes defined by sweeping tusks and domed skulls. Thick fur covers their bodies, layered over dense underwool that traps warmth. Beneath the skin lies substantial fat, storing energy and forming a barrier against frigid air. Woolly rhinoceroses traverse similar terrain, their massive frames wrapped in long hair, horns sweeping forward as they forage through snow for buried vegetation. Their nasal passages enlarge and complexify, warming cold air before it reaches the lungs. Teeth remain suited for abrasive grasses, while digestive systems continue extracting nutrients from sparse winter forage. In other regions, giant ground sloths inhabit cooler forests and open woodlands. Some species reach the size of modern elephants, supported by robust limbs and curved claws designed for pulling down branches. Their bulk conserves heat, reducing surface area relative to volume. Slow movements economize energy during seasons when food becomes less predictable. Glacial cycles repeatedly reshape habitats. As ice advances, sea levels drop, exposing land bridges that connect continents. Faunal exchanges occur across these temporary corridors, mixing lineages between Eurasia and North America. When ice retreats, rising seas isolate populations again, allowing divergence to proceed in separated refugia. This alternation between connection and separation contributes to bursts of diversification and extinction. Cold adaptation expresses itself not only through fur and fat, but also through behavior. Herd migration tracks shifting plant growth as seasons alternate between glacial maxima and warmer interglacial periods. Social groups offer collective vigilance and thermal advantages, bodies clustered against wind across open steppe. Metabolic adjustments support prolonged activity in sub-zero temperatures, endothermy maintaining stable internal conditions despite external extremes. Vegetation patterns respond in tandem. Tundra spreads beneath retreating glaciers, later replaced by forest as warmth returns. Each transition alters food availability, selecting for flexibility in diet and range. Mammalian giants persist through multiple glacial pulses, their physiological and behavioral traits refined by successive climatic tests. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the planet cycles between cold and relative warmth, yet mammals continue to occupy its harshest environments. From Arctic margins to high-altitude plateaus, fur-lined bodies and insulated cores navigate conditions that would have limited earlier terrestrial rulers. Ice ages do not halt mammalian expansion. They shape it, embedding resilience into lineages capable of surviving a world in flux. Inside the cranial vault, volume begins to increase in quiet proportion. Across multiple mammalian lineages, endocranial casts preserved in fossil skulls reveal gradual expansion relative to body mass. This change does not occur all at once, nor does it follow a single branch. It appears repeatedly in carnivores that coordinate hunts, in primates navigating layered habitats, in cetaceans adapting to acoustic worlds beneath the surface. Neural tissue, metabolically costly and carefully protected, becomes a greater investment. As brains enlarge, surface folding grows more intricate. Convolutions increase cortical area without requiring an impractical enlargement of the skull. Sensory regions refine further, integrating sight, sound, and touch into coherent perception. The hippocampus, involved in spatial memory, expands in species that traverse wide territories or complex environments. Mapping routes, recognizing individuals, and recalling seasonal resources become central to survival. Problem solving emerges not as abstract contemplation, but as applied flexibility. Carnivores adjust strategies when prey alter behavior or terrain shifts. Primates manipulate objects, testing textures and weights before consumption. Dolphins coordinate movements within shifting schools of fish, their vocalizations synchronizing pursuit. Each instance reflects neural circuitry capable of evaluating multiple variables and selecting among them. Social memory deepens alongside brain growth. In herd and pack forming species, individuals must track hierarchies, alliances, and kinship over extended periods. Recognition extends beyond immediate interaction, preserving information about past encounters that shape future responses. Vocal signals diversify, accompanied by subtle body language and scent marking that convey status or intent. Communication becomes layered, conveying more than immediate alarm or attraction. Parental care, already established, benefits from enhanced cognition. Extended juvenile periods allow learning through observation and imitation. Young mammals absorb techniques for foraging, migration, and conflict resolution within a social framework that encourages shared experience. The transmission of knowledge, though not yet cultural in a human sense, stabilizes successful behaviors across generations. Energy requirements rise with neural expansion. Larger brains demand consistent nourishment and oxygen, linking intelligence to dietary quality and metabolic efficiency. In some lineages, shifts toward calorie rich foods support this growth. In others, cooperative hunting or complex foraging strategies offset energetic costs. Across continents and oceans, mammals increasingly rely on adaptability rather than sheer physical dominance. Size remains advantageous in many contexts, yet it no longer defines capability alone. A smaller predator with coordinated allies may outmaneuver a solitary giant. A primate with refined memory navigates shifting landscapes more effectively than a heavier competitor. The expansion of brain relative to body does not produce a single outcome. It multiplies pathways. Each lineage expresses cognition according to ecological demands, shaping behaviors suited to forest canopy, open steppe, deep sea, or frozen plain. In the fossil record, this transformation appears subtle, measured in milliliters of cranial space. In living systems, it manifests as flexibility, foresight, and increasingly intricate interaction with a changing world. Across open plains and forest margins, movement begins to synchronize. Instead of solitary figures crossing the landscape, clusters form and hold, individuals adjusting pace to one another until patterns emerge. Herd structures become increasingly common among grazing mammals, not as sudden inventions, but as gradual consolidations of proximity and shared vigilance. Living together reduces individual exposure to danger while increasing the pool of watchful eyes scanning horizon and undergrowth. Within these groups, relationships deepen beyond temporary alignment. Mothers remain with offspring longer than in earlier eras, extending periods of nourishment and protection. Milk continues to sustain the young, but time becomes an equally valuable resource. Juveniles learn migration routes, feeding strategies, and social cues through extended association. Knowledge is not encoded in bone but carried in memory, passed along through daily repetition and example. Carnivores refine parallel strategies. Group hunting takes shape in certain lineages, particularly among early canids and later felids that tolerate cooperation. Rather than relying solely on individual strength or speed, coordinated pursuit allows the targeting of larger prey. Pack members distribute roles, some driving herds toward others positioned to intercept. Success depends on timing and trust, shaped by repeated interaction and reinforced through survival. Communication grows increasingly layered within these societies. Vocal signals diversify in pitch and duration, carrying meaning across distance. Posture conveys intent, whether asserting dominance or signaling submission. Scent marks boundaries and identity, a chemical language embedded in territory. In primate groups, facial expressions and gestures complement sound, enriching the vocabulary of social exchange. Warm blood supports sustained activity within these dynamic networks. Endothermy allows continuous engagement in complex behaviors across varying climates, maintaining alertness during both day and night. Enlarged brains, already expanding across lineages, integrate social information alongside sensory input. Neural circuits strengthen as individuals track alliances, kinship, and rivalries. Memory extends beyond simple recognition toward nuanced awareness of group structure. Emotional bonding takes firmer hold as cooperative survival proves advantageous. Affiliative behaviors, such as grooming and close resting positions, strengthen ties within primate groups. In herd animals, coordinated movements reinforce cohesion. Young animals raised within stable groups display greater resilience and social competence, enhancing the overall fitness of the lineage. Environmental pressures reinforce these trends. Open habitats demand collective vigilance, while variable climates reward shared knowledge of shifting resources. The interplay between ecological challenge and social adaptation tightens over generations, weaving individual lives into broader, communal frameworks. As mammals continue to diversify across continents, social systems become integral to their dominance. Predator and prey alike operate within structured communities, balancing competition with cooperation. Through extended care, coordinated action, and expanding communication, warm-blooded bodies supported by increasingly social brains establish patterns of collective existence that reshape terrestrial life. Continents do not remain fixed. They drift apart slowly, carrying entire communities with them. As oceans widen and land bridges vanish, populations once connected become separated by thousands of kilometers of water. Over millions of years, this geographic isolation reshapes the direction of mammalian evolution, turning separation into a quiet engine of diversity. South America provides one of the most striking examples. After the breakup of Gondwana, it remained isolated for much of the Cenozoic, bordered by ocean to the north and south. Cut off from many placental mammals evolving elsewhere, its resident lineages diversified into forms rarely seen on other continents. Hoofed herbivores developed along unique trajectories, including light upturns with elongated necks and bodies reminiscent of camels or horses, yet belonging to entirely distinct branches. Predatory niches were filled by sparacidonts, carnivorous marsupial relatives that paralleled the roles of placental carnivores in Eurasia and North America. Australia followed a similar yet separate path. As it drifted northward, isolation favored the rise of marsupials as dominant mammals. Kangaroos, diprotodonts, and marsupial carnivores occupied ecological spaces that placental mammals held elsewhere. The absence of certain competitors allowed radiation into grazing, burrowing, and climbing roles without direct challenge from placental analogs. Monotremes, egg-laying mammals, persisted alongside marsupials, representing lineages that elsewhere declined. These regional experiments often converged on familiar shapes. In South America, some native ungulates evolved body plans that resembled horses despite lacking close ancestry. In Australia, the thylacine developed a skull and posture similar to canid predators across oceans, a reflection of convergent evolution shaped by similar ecological demands. Isolation did not produce randomness, it produced parallel solutions molded by shared physical constraints. When continents eventually reconnected, as occurred during the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, exchange followed. The Great American Biotic Interchange introduced placental carnivores and hoofed mammals into South America, while sending armadillos and opossums northward. Some endemic forms declined under new competition, while others adapted or retreated. The long isolation had fostered innovation, yet reconnection tested those innovations against external rivals. Across these separated land masses, environmental pressures remained consistent in principle. Herbivores required efficient digestion and locomotion. Predators required coordination and strength. Arboreal species required grasping abilities. Geographic barriers altered the players, but not the rules. As a result, evolution repeated certain designs in different contexts, highlighting both constraint and creativity. Continental isolation thus functioned as a workshop of diversity. By limiting gene flow and introducing unique combinations of climate, vegetation, and available niches, it encouraged mammals to explore varied pathways. When reconnection arrived, the mosaic of global fauna reflected millions of years of independent refinement. Separation, measured in shifting tectonic plates and widening seas, had quietly diversified the mammalian story. In equatorial Africa, beneath canopies layered with vines and broad leaves, certain primate lineages begin to diverge in subtle but lasting ways. These are the early anthropoids, emerging during the late Eocene and Oligocene, their fossils preserved in ancient river deposits and forest margins. They are not yet apes, not yet anything that would resemble later hominins, yet within their skulls and limbs lie gradual shifts that mark a deeper commitment to perception and coordination. The orbits of their eyes enlarge and rotate forward more fully, tightening the overlap of visual fields. Depth perception sharpens further, allowing precise judgment of distance in densely structured habitats. The reliance on scent begins to recede in some groups as vision gains prominence. Snouts shorten slightly, bringing eyes closer together at the front of the face, concentrating attention on what lies directly ahead. Within the cranial cavity, brain volume increases modestly relative to body size. Regions associated with visual processing expand, folding into more intricate surfaces. Integration between sensory input and motor control becomes more refined, enabling calculated leaps and steady progression along flexible branches. Memory of routes through complex canopy networks enhances efficiency in locating seasonal fruit and avoiding danger. Hands and feet continue to adapt to arboreal living. Digits grow more dexterous, pads sensitive to texture and pressure. Wrists and ankles permit rotational movements that stabilize bodies during vertical climbing and cautious descent. Tails in many species remain long and expressive, aiding balance and signaling social cues within groups that spend much of their lives above ground. Diet shapes further specialization. Fruit rich in simple sugars supports the energetic demands of growing neural tissue. Insect consumption persists, providing protein necessary for development. Anthropoid primates refine their ability to pluck small items from branches, manipulating food with increasing precision before consumption. Social structures deepen as well. Groups form with recognizable hierarchies, maintained through vocalization, grooming, and subtle facial signals. Infants remain dependent for extended periods, allowing time for learning through observation and interaction. Knowledge of feeding sites and safe pathways passes informally across generations, reinforcing patterns of cohesion. Environmental shifts across Africa introduce periods of fragmentation in forest cover, isolating populations and encouraging divergence. Some lineages adapt to slightly more open habitats, while others remain closely tied to dense canopy. Each pathway emphasizes enhanced vision and cognitive coordination, traits that anchor their evolutionary trajectory. This progression unfolds gradually, layer by layer in sediment and bone. Anthropoid primates do not expand in size dramatically. Rather, They refine capacities already present in earlier forms. Their advancement lies in perception and processing, in the steady enlargement of neural architecture that supports complex navigation and social exchange. Within African forests, a lineage continues without spectacle, guided by improved sight and growing cognition. Its members move through branches with quiet assurance, carrying within them an incremental deepening of awareness that will shape distant futures. Rainfall patterns begin to falter across portions of eastern Africa. Over hundreds of thousands of years, then millions, monsoon rhythms shift and global cooling trends intensify. Forests that once formed continuous green corridors fragment into patches separated by woodland and expanding grassland. Rivers alter their courses, lakes fluctuate, and mosaic landscapes replace uninterrupted canopy. Within these changing environments, certain primate populations find themselves navigating increasing distances between trees. The safety of dense branches no longer stretches unbroken across the horizon. Instead, clusters of woodland rise like islands within open terrain. Movement between them requires time spent on the ground, exposed to new pressures and possibilities. Anatomy responds gradually. Pelvic structure in some lineages begins to shorten and broaden, redistributing support for upright stance during brief intervals. The angle of the femur shifts inward toward the knee, aligning weight more efficiently beneath the torso when standing or walking. Foot bones adjust subtly, arches strengthening to absorb impact across firmer surfaces than flexible branches ever demanded. These changes do not indicate an immediate abandonment of trees. Many early hominin ancestors likely retained climbing abilities while supplementing their range with terrestrial travel. Hands remain capable of grasping, shoulders flexible enough for ascent. Yet time spent upright increases incrementally, particularly when scanning grasses for predators or distant resources. Climate drying influences food availability as well. Fruit becomes less predictable in fragmented forest patches, encouraging dietary flexibility. Tubers, seeds, and occasional small animals supplement traditional fare. Foraging on the ground promotes longer bouts of upright posture, freeing hands to carry gathered items or manipulate objects more efficiently. Vision, already refined in earlier anthropoids, gains new context in open spaces. An elevated vantage allows broader survey across grasses stirred by wind. Standing upright raises the head above ground vegetation, extending lines of sight that aid in detecting movement. The spine adapts slowly to support this orientation, lumbar curves forming to balance weight over hips. Social structures adjust to new terrain. Groups traveling between woodland clusters must coordinate across exposed ground, maintaining cohesion in environments with fewer natural shelters. Communication remains essential, conveyed through vocal signals and gesture, now projected across greater distances. The landscape itself becomes an agent of selection. Drying climates and retreating forests do not dictate a single outcome, yet they create conditions where versatility favors survival. Posture, gait, and limb proportion respond to terrain that alternates between tree cover and open plain. In these transitional habitats, hints of habitual bipedalism appear not as abrupt revolutions, but as cumulative refinements. The shift unfolds across generations, shaped by environmental variability. The ground, once secondary to the canopy, assumes increasing importance in daily movement, guiding anatomical experimentation that carries subtle but lasting consequences. Footprints pressed into soft volcanic ash remain long after the bodies that made them vanished. In eastern Africa, ancient trackways preserve a pattern unmistakably upright. one foot placed directly ahead of the other, arches lifting gently from the ground. These impressions belong to early hominins, members of a lineage that had begun to refine habitual bipedalism into a defining mode of movement. Skeletal evidence supports what those tracks suggest. Pelvic bones shorten and broaden, reshaping the basin to support abdominal organs during upright stance. The ilia curve around the sides, stabilizing the torso with each step. This configuration allows the body's weight to balance more directly above the hips, reducing the muscular strain required to remain vertical. At the base of the skull, another quiet alteration appears. The foramen magnum, the opening through which the spinal cord passes, shifts forward beneath the cranium. In quadrupedal ancestors, it had positioned toward the rear, aligning with a horizontally held spine. In early hominins, its forward placement reflects a head balanced atop a vertical column, requiring less constant muscular effort to hold level. Lower limbs lengthen relative to arms, femurs angling inward toward the knees to maintain stability under the body's center of gravity. Knee joints enlarge, bearing greater load during extended periods of walking. Feet develop stronger arches and a more aligned big toe, no longer widely divergent for grasping branches, but oriented to push off efficiently during stride. These modifications increase walking efficiency across open terrain. Freed from primary locomotion, hands assume new roles. Fingers retain dexterity from arboreal ancestry, yet now they carry objects, manipulate food, and interact with surroundings in ways not directly tied to weight bearing. The shoulder remains mobile, yet the emphasis gradually shifts toward fine motor control rather than climbing strength alone. Energy expenditure changes alongside anatomy. Efficient bipedal gait reduces the cost of long-distance travel in warm environments. Upright posture also lowers the surface area exposed to overhead sun while increasing exposure to cooling air currents. Over time, these small advantages accumulate, supporting endurance across shifting landscapes. Diet and behavior intertwine with locomotion. Upright walkers gather varied resources, transporting them between foraging sites and group members. Social structures adapt to new movement patterns, with individuals maintaining cohesion while covering greater distances. Communication continues to play a role. Gestures now more visible when performed from a vertical stance. This transformation does not occur abruptly. Early hominins likely combined climbing with walking for extended intervals. Yet as anatomical refinements accumulate, bipedalism becomes the dominant mode of travel. The landscape of eastern Africa, alternating between woodland and grassland, shapes bodies prepared to move efficiently across both. In bone and footprint, a new survival strategy becomes evident. Upright walking redefines balance, reach, and interaction with terrain. It marks a transition not of speed or size, but of posture, setting in motion further changes that will continue to unfold across future strata. Fractured stone edges lie scattered among ancient river sediments, their sharp faces reflecting deliberate strikes rather than random breakage. In deposits dated to more than 2 million years ago, flakes and cores appear with repeated patterns of percussion. These simple stone tools, often associated with early members of the genus Homo and possibly late Australopiths, mark a subtle but enduring shift in how bodies interact with environment. The earliest implements are modest in design. A rounded cobble is struck with another stone, producing sharp flakes along its edge. These flakes, though crude by later standards, carry cutting power sufficient to slice through hide and sinew. Bones found at the same sites bear marks that align with these edges, thin incisions across surfaces where meat was removed or marrow accessed. Processing animal carcasses becomes more systematic, supplementing plant-based diets with calorie-rich tissue. Access to meat and marrow provides concentrated energy that supports growing neural demands. Higher quality nutrition allows extended development of the brain, particularly during childhood. Juveniles learn through observation and imitation, watching elders select stones, position hands, and direct force with precision. Over time, the relationship between hand and mind tightens, each shaping the refinement of the other. Tool use does not occur in isolation. Evidence suggests cooperation during hunting or scavenging activities. Multiple individuals likely participated in driving prey or defending carcasses from competitors. Sharing of resources strengthens social bonds and extends survival across group members. Communication becomes increasingly coordinated, gestures and vocalizations aligning action toward shared goals. Repeated engagement with tools alters selective pressures. Individuals capable of finer motor control and enhanced planning gain advantages in food acquisition. Cognitive acceleration follows not from size alone, but from the layered complexity of behavior. Memory retains sequences of strikes that produce effective edges. Foresight anticipates future needs, encouraging transport of suitable stones across distances. Hands, freed earlier by upright posture, now function as instruments of transformation. Fingers adjust grip and pressure, thumbs opposing with accuracy that channels force into controlled fractures. Subtle changes in wrist and finger bone morphology reflect this consistent use, reinforcing dexterity across generations. Fire remains beyond regular mastery at this stage, yet meat processed with stone reduces chewing time and aids digestion. Increased caloric return supports reproductive success and longevity. Behavior, once primarily reactive, begins to modify environmental context in tangible ways. Stone tools, simple in appearance, represent an interface between intention and material. Through repeated practice, early hominins reshape landscapes not by sheer strength, but by shaping objects that amplify capability. Over millennia, this interplay between cognition and action feeds back into evolutionary trajectory. What begins as fractured rock beside watercourses becomes a foundation for behavioral influence on natural selection. The integration of tool use, social cooperation, and dietary change signals a phase where adaptation is guided not solely by anatomy, but by learned patterns that accumulate and persist within communities. Charred bones and reddened earth lie embedded within ancient cave floors, faint evidence of a glow that once pushed back darkness. At several sites, dated to nearly 1 million years ago, ash layers and heat-altered stone suggest that early humans learned not merely to approach wildfire, but to tend and preserve it. Controlled fire enters the archaeological record as scattered traces of transformation, subtle yet profound. Flame extends the boundaries of safety. Predators that once moved confidently through darkness hesitate before flickering light and smoke. The perimeter of a campsite gains definition, its warmth signaling human presence across open ground. Night, previously a time of concealment and vulnerability, shifts toward shared visibility. Eyes adjust not to starlight alone, but to embers that pulse steadily against surrounding shadow. Heat alters food as well. Meat placed near coals softens, connective tissue breaking down under sustained warmth. Cooking reduces chewing time and eases digestion, allowing nutrients to be absorbed more efficiently. Certain plant toxins diminish when exposed to heat, expanding dietary breadth. Energy extracted from prepared food supports metabolic demands, particularly those of neural tissue already enlarging across generations. Fire reshapes social patterns. Evenings draw individuals into closer proximity as warmth and light concentrate activity within a defined circle. Communication extends into hours, once surrendered to darkness. Gestures become visible in low illumination, and vocalizations carry within intimate spaces bounded by glow. Stories, whether simple recounting of events or more symbolic exchange, find a setting in the shared stillness of night. Extended waking hours provide opportunities for planning and coordination. Groups prepare tools, process materials, and reinforce alliances through repeated interaction. Young individuals observe elders in conditions that encourage patience rather than immediate movement. The rhythm of the day lengthens, structured by alternating labor and communal rest around the same fire. Physiologically, warmth reduces the need for constant muscular thermoregulation during cooler periods. Energy conserved in maintaining body temperature becomes available for growth and activity. Combined with cooked food, this surplus contributes to gradual increases in brain size and complexity. Neural circuits benefit from reliable caloric input, reinforcing capacities for memory and foresight. Landscape management also begins in small ways. Controlled burns clear underbrush, guiding the movement of game and encouraging new plant growth. Smoke signals presence beyond immediate campsites. Fire becomes both tool and boundary, shaping terrain as well as diet. The mastery of flame does not eliminate risk. Embers can escape containment, and resources for fuel must be gathered and maintained. Yet, over time, the relationship stabilizes into knowledge transmitted across generations. What began as opportunistic use of natural fire evolves into deliberate control. Under steady glow, the distinction between day and night softens. Darkness no longer dictates retreat alone. Warm light gathers bodies into proximity, supports nourishment, and sustains vigilance. In its quiet crackle, fire alters survival not through size or strength, but through illumination and shared time. Bones emerge from permafrost and dry caves, immense and weathered, their surfaces marked by time and shifting soil. They belong to animals that once defined entire regions during the late Ice Age. For hundreds of thousands of years, mammoths moved across northern steppes, saber-toothed cats patrolled open plains, and giant ground sloths foraged in woodland margins. By the close of the Pleistocene, many of these giants were gone. Climate played its part first in long rhythms. Glacial cycles narrowed in intensity and timing, ice sheets retreating more rapidly than in previous pulses. Warming climates altered vegetation zones, reshaping the mosaic of tundra, steppe, and forest that had sustained large herbivores. Grasslands fragmented, wetlands shifted, and migration routes no longer aligned with historical patterns. Animals adapted repeatedly to earlier fluctuations, yet this transition unfolded alongside new pressures. Human expansion intensified during the same interval. Anatomically modern humans spread across Eurasia, Australia, and the Americas, carrying with them advanced stone tools, coordinated hunting strategies, and growing ecological reach. Cut marks on fossil bones and kill sites associated with large mammals indicate direct interaction. Fire reshaped landscapes intentionally or incidentally, modifying habitat structure in ways that favored some species while disadvantaging others. The convergence of climate change and human presence narrowed margins of survival for megafauna. Mammoths, already adjusting to warming conditions, faced additional mortality from targeted hunting. Small, isolated populations proved vulnerable to rapid environmental shifts. Saber-toothed cats, dependent on large herbivores for sustenance, declined as prey species diminished. Their specialized dentition and hunting strategies, refined across millions of years, no longer aligned with rapidly changing ecosystems. Extinctions did not occur everywhere at once. Some islands retained dwarf mammoth populations long after mainland groups vanished. In other regions, certain large mammals persisted for millennia before disappearing. The pattern varied geographically, yet the broader trend remained consistent across continents. Within a relatively brief geological span, many of the most imposing mammals faded from the fossil record. Ecosystems reorganized in their absence. Vegetation, previously shaped by heavy grazing or browsing, responded to reduced pressure. Smaller herbivores expanded into vacant niches, altering plant community dynamics in new directions. Predators adapted where possible or declined alongside their former prey. The balance that had characterized late Ice Age landscapes shifted quietly yet profoundly. This period marks another inflection in the mammalian story. The disappearance of giants does not signal collapse of mammals as a whole, but rather a recalibration of size, strategy, and distribution. Humans, already part of the equation, remain and expand, becoming primary agents in ecological change. In sediment layers where large bones once dominate, smaller remains become more common. The transformation is recorded not in dramatic rupture alone, but in gradual thinning of megafaunal presence. Another turning point settles into the geological archive, subtle yet decisive, reshaping the trajectory of terrestrial life once more. From equatorial rainforests to wind-carved dunes, from coral-fringed coastlines to frozen archipelagos, mammals occupy nearly every corner of Earth's surface. Their presence is not concentrated in a single biome or climate, but dispersed across gradients of temperature, altitude, and humidity. What began as small nocturnal creatures in ancient forests has become a lineage woven into oceans, skies, deserts, and polar ice. On every continent, terrestrial ecosystems include mammalian herbivores and carnivores shaping energy flow. In African savannas, herds of ungulates move in seasonal patterns, grazing grasses that respond to rainfall cycles. In Asian and North American forests, deer browse understory vegetation while predators track scent trails through leaf litter. South America hosts monkeys in canopy and rodents along riverbanks, each adapted to local plant communities and terrain. Beyond land, oceans hold fully aquatic mammals whose bodies have relinquished terrestrial proportions. Whales traverse entire basins, guided by currents and acoustic maps. Seals and sea lions divide time between shore and sea, insulated by blubber against cold water. Dolphins coordinate hunts in shifting schools, navigating with precision through pressure and sound. Marine ecosystems include mammals at multiple trophic levels, from filter-feeding giants to agile coastal hunters. Airspace too carries mammalian life. Bats pursue insects over farmland and forest edge, some feeding on nectar that pollinates nocturnal blossoms, others dispersing seeds that regenerate disturbed habitats. Their roosts occupy caves, hollow trees, and urban structures alike, linking natural and altered landscapes. Polar regions, once thought beyond mammalian endurance, support specialized forms. Arctic foxes pad across snowfields with insulated paws. Polar bears patrol sea ice margins, relying on blubber stores and acute senses. In Antarctica's surrounding waters, seals breed on drifting ice, their physiology tuned to sub-zero air and frigid seas. Deserts present a different challenge, defined by heat and scarcity of water. Small rodents conserve moisture through concentrated urine and nocturnal activity. Camels in arid zones manage temperature fluctuations and endure long intervals between drinking. Fennec foxes dissipate heat through large ears while burrowing in sand for shelter. Altitude gradients extend this occupation further. Mountain goats traverse narrow ledges at elevations where oxygen thins. Yaks graze alpine plateaus, thick coats buffering cold winds. Each adaptation reflects selective pressures unique to geography and climate. This global distribution signifies more than simple survival. It represents total ecological occupation. Mammals fill roles as grazers, browsers, predators, scavengers, pollinators, seed dispersers, and ecosystem engineers. Their metabolic flexibility, parental investment, and social complexity underpin this reach. From tropics to tundra, across fresh water and open sea, the lineage that once remained hidden beneath reptilian dominance now inhabits nearly every habitable niche. Earth's landscapes, varied and shifting, continue to host mammals as integral participants in the flow of energy and matter. Beneath varied shapes and sizes, a shared architecture persists. Whether scaled to the height of a giraffe or compact as a desert mouse, mammals carry a body plan assembled gradually across deep time. It is not dramatic at first glance. Its power lies in repetition, in traits retained and refined across continents and climates. Fur forms the outer layer for most lineages, a covering rooted in early sensory hairs that once detected subtle movements through soil and undergrowth. Over millions of years, these filaments thickened and diversified into insulating coats. In cold environments, they lengthen and layer, trapping air close to skin. In hotter regions, they thin or shorten, allowing heat to dissipate. Even when sparse, hair follicles remain embedded within the skin, evidence of ancestral design. Milk, produced by specialized glands, defines another thread of continuity. Mammary tissue nourishes young directly from the mother's body, sustaining growth during early vulnerability. This intimate transfer of energy extends parental care beyond protection alone. Across species, the duration and composition of milk adjust to ecological need, yet the fundamental strategy remains constant. Nutrients flow from adult to offspring in a living exchange that stabilizes survival during development. Warm blood underlies these systems. Endothermy maintains internal temperature within narrow limits, decoupling activity from external fluctuation. Whether foraging in Arctic twilight or traversing equatorial savanna, mammals regulate heat through metabolism and circulation. Brown adipose tissue generates warmth in some species, while sweat glands and panting moderate excess heat in others. The internal furnace, costly in calories, grants independence from daily extremes. Dentition reveals further refinement. Unlike reptiles with relatively uniform teeth, mammals possess differentiated sets. Incisors slice or gnaw, canines grasp, premolars, and molars crush or shear. This heterodont arrangement expands dietary range, allowing specialization without abandoning versatility. Enamel patterns adjust to grasses, flesh, fruit, or bone, yet the underlying blueprint persists. Within the skull, three small bones bridge the middle ear, transmitting vibrations from eardrum to inner ear with remarkable sensitivity. Derived from ancestral jaw elements, these ossicles enhance auditory acuity, particularly at higher frequencies. Fine-tuning of hearing supports communication, predator detection, and social interaction across diverse habitats. Each of these features evolved incrementally, selected and reselected across shifting landscapes. None alone ensures dominance. Together they form a resilient framework. Fur insulates the warm-blooded core. Milk sustains the growing brain. Differentiated teeth exploit varied resources. Sensitive hearing and regulated temperature extend awareness and activity. Through extinction events, climate swings, and continental drift, this body plan adapts without losing coherence. It is refined rather than replaced, adjusted rather than discarded. Beneath the diversity of whales and wolves, primates and rodents, lies a common inheritance shaped over millions of years. The mammalian form endures not as a fixed template, but as a flexible foundation carried forward into every new environment it encounters. Success, in evolutionary terms, rarely announces itself with grandeur. It accumulates quietly through small advantages that persist across generations. In the long arc, following the disappearance of the dinosaurs, mammals did not inherit the planet through sudden dominance, but through flexibility woven into their biology and behavior. Flexibility begins with diet and habitat. Mammals as a group rarely bind themselves to a single food source or environment. Rodents shift between seeds, roots, and insects depending on season. Carnivores alternate between hunting and scavenging. Even large herbivores adjust migration routes in response to rainfall and vegetation change. This ecological plasticity allows lineages to endure fluctuations that eliminate more specialized competitors. Reproductive patterns reinforce this resilience. Many mammals reproduce at relatively fast rates compared to large reptiles of the past. Shorter gestation periods in smaller species, combined with multiple offspring per cycle, enable rapid population recovery after disturbance. Even larger mammals, though slower to mature, invest in fewer young with extended protection and nourishment. These strategies balance quantity and care, adjusting reproductive tempo to environmental stability. Endothermy supports this adaptability. By regulating internal temperature, mammals sustain activity across wider thermal ranges. Cold seasons limit ectothermic activity, yet mammals continue to forage, migrate, or hunt. In extreme heat, physiological mechanisms such as sweating or panting, moderate overheating, the energetic cost of warm blood is significant, yet it grants temporal independence, expanding the hours and climates within which life can persist. Brain development further shapes long-term survival. Enlarged neocortices in many lineages enhance memory, learning, and social interaction. Behavioral flexibility allows mammals to modify strategies without waiting for anatomical change. A predator may adjust hunting technique. A herbivore may alter foraging schedule. Intelligence does not eliminate environmental pressure, but it provides an additional layer of response beyond instinct alone. Parental investment deepens these advantages. Extended care, including lactation and social teaching, increases juvenile survival. Offspring learn not only how to find food or avoid danger, but how to navigate complex social structures. In species with cooperative breeding or group protection, the survival of young becomes a shared effort, strengthening cohesion within populations. These traits do not guarantee permanence. Mammalian history includes extinctions and contractions. Yet flexibility, reproductive capacity, metabolic independence, cognitive growth, and sustained parental care combine into a framework capable of absorbing change. They allow mammals to occupy disturbed landscapes, recover after climatic shifts, and explore emerging niches. Across continents and through shifting epochs, this suite of characteristics supports continuity. Success emerges less from physical dominance than from responsiveness. Mammals persist because they adapt, reproduce, learn, and nurture within environments that seldom remain stable. Over millions of years, these traits favor long term survival, allowing the lineage to endure not through singular triumph, but through steady adjustment to an ever changing world. Seen from orbit, Earth appears serene, a blue sphere veiled in white cloud, continents drifting slowly beneath atmospheric currents. No trace of upheaval is visible at that scale. Yet within its layered crust lies evidence of a single asteroid impact that altered the trajectory of life. A thin band of iridium in sedimentary rock records the moment when one collision reshaped ecosystems across the globe. From that distant vantage, the event becomes both sudden and small. A rock roughly 10 kilometers wide intersects with a planet older than 4 billion years. Energy releases, climates shift, and entire lineages vanish. The surface reorganizes, forests return, oceans recalibrate, and in sheltered niches, minor traits gain unexpected importance. Small survival advantages compound over time. Endothermy, burrowing behavior, dietary flexibility, and rapid reproduction persist quietly through crisis. In isolation, they appear modest, yet compounded across generations, they alter outcomes. What survives one disruption carries its traits forward into landscapes emptied of former competitors. Natural selection does not anticipate catastrophe, yet it preserves variation capable of responding when conditions change. Evolution moves not through intention, but through opportunity. Vacant niches invite experimentation in form and function. After the dinosaurs disappear, mammals diversify. Later, climate fluctuations and extinctions reshape distribution again, favoring traits suited to cold, heat, or social complexity. Each upheaval removes constraints and widens the field for adaptation. Catastrophe creates openings that would otherwise remain closed. From space, such transitions merge into continuity. Mountain ranges rise and erode, ice sheets advance and retreat, species radiate and decline. The temporal scale compresses complexity into patterns. Yet within those patterns lie incremental adjustments, each rooted in variation and selection. The asteroid that ended the Cretaceous becomes one inflection among many. It demonstrates how external forces intersect with internal resilience. Survival does not belong to the largest or strongest alone. It rests with lineages carrying combinations of traits suited to shifting context. Over millions of years, the descendants of small survivors spread into oceans, skies, and deserts, reshaping ecosystems without erasing their origins. Perspective widens when viewed beyond immediate horizon. The dominance of any group appears provisional. Geological time smooths triumph into transition, revealing continuity beneath apparent rupture. One impact alters direction, but the planet continues its orbit, seasons turning, continents drifting. From this vantage, Earth's history becomes a sequence of openings and responses. Asteroids, climate change, tectonics, and biological innovation intertwine. Mammals rise not solely because catastrophe cleared space, but because their accumulated traits met that space with readiness. Against the vastness of space, the story of life unfolds as a dialogue between chance events and inherited capacity, each shaping the world that follows. Strata of rock do not favor permanence. They record presence and absence with equal patience, preserving the outlines of creatures that once seemed unassailable. For more than 150 million years, dinosaurs shaped terrestrial ecosystems. Their footprints patterned floodplains, Their bodies influenced vegetation, their predators defined food webs. In that immense span, dominance must have felt like a constant rhythm embedded within the planet itself. Yet the geological column shows a boundary where that rhythm breaks. Above it, mammals expand. For roughly 66 million years, they diversify, radiate, and occupy nearly every major niche on land and sea. From small burrowers to ocean giants, their influence becomes woven into global systems. The shift appears decisive when viewed in isolation, as though one age replaced another with finality. Time suggests otherwise. 66 million years, though vast to human imagination, remains less than half the duration of dinosaur dominance. Geological scales measure success not in centuries or millennia, but in epochs. Continents continue to drift, mountains rise and erode, ocean currents shift, and atmospheric composition adjusts incrementally. Within these processes, climatic regimes oscillate between warmth and cold, aridity and humidity. Dominance, then, reveals itself as contingent. It depends on alignment between biological traits and environmental conditions. When that alignment falters, influence contracts. The disappearance of the dinosaurs demonstrates how swiftly entrenched systems can unravel when external forces intervene. The late Ice Age extinctions illustrate that even widespread mammalian giants can fade under combined pressures of climate change and expanding human activity. Present ecosystems carry the imprint of mammals at nearly every level, yet they remain embedded within dynamic planetary cycles. Ice caps respond to temperature, forests expand and retreat with rainfall patterns, ocean acidity fluctuates with atmospheric carbon, species adapt where possible and decline where conditions outpace flexibility. Evolution continues not as a ladder of progress, but as an ongoing negotiation with change. This perspective offers quiet caution without drama. No lineage holds permanent claim to ecological supremacy. The traits that confer advantage in one epoch may prove insufficient in another. Biological success requires continual adjustment, not static strength. Rock layers will eventually record the present as past, compressing current abundance into fossil traces. Future shifts, whether gradual or abrupt, will reshape which groups thrive and which recede. Mammals, for now, occupy a position of wide distribution and ecological breadth, yet their tenure rests on the same principles that governed earlier rulers of the land. In the slow unfolding of planetary time, dominance is a phase, not a destination. Climate patterns continue to evolve, tectonic plates to rearrange landscapes, and biological communities to reconfigure. Within this continuity lies recognition that adaptability, rather than permanence, defines survival across the deepest scales of Earth's history. In the quiet interior of every living cell, strands of DNA coil and replicate, carrying sequences inherited across immeasurable spans of time. Within the human genome lie patterns not unique to our species, nor even to primates alone, but shared with mice, whales, bats, and countless other mammals. These genetic traces reveal a continuity that stretches back beyond grasslands and ice ages, beyond the rise of primates, to small Cretaceous creatures that survived when others did not. Humans stand as mammals, shaped by the same foundational blueprint described earlier. We possess hair, though reduced in density. We nourish offspring through milk. Our bodies regulate internal temperature through metabolism. Differentiated teeth line our jaws, and three small bones transmit vibrations within our ears. These features are not recent inventions. They are inherited architecture, refined long before the first hominin walked upright. Comparative genomics deepens this recognition. Large portions of human DNA align with sequences found in rodents and even marine mammals. Genes guiding limb development, neural patterning, and organ formation reflect shared ancestry. Mutations accumulate over time, altering expression and detail, yet the underlying code demonstrates that all living mammals descend from common ancestors that persisted through deep past crises. Among those ancestral populations were the tiny survivors of the asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous. Their ecological niches were modest, their bodies small and adaptable. From their lineages radiated forms that would eventually populate every continent. Humans occupy one branch of this expansive tree, distinguished by culture and technology, yet biologically continuous with those early mammals. The asteroid's distant echo remains embedded in this continuity. Had that collision not occurred, dinosaur dominated ecosystems might have constrained mammalian diversification for far longer. The survival of certain traits through that upheaval set conditions for future branching. In this sense, human existence is indirectly linked to planetary contingency, shaped by both resilience and chance. Yet, connection need not imply triumph. Evolution does not chart a path toward human arrival as predetermined outcome. It unfolds through selection, acting on variation within shifting environments. Humans emerge not as culmination, but as participant within ongoing process. Our lineage inherits capacities for language, abstract reasoning, and technological adaptation, yet these arise from incremental modifications layered upon ancient mammalian foundations. Recognizing this ancestry widens perspective. Within our physiology resides evidence of shared origin with creatures that navigate oceans, deserts, and forests. The distinctions between species remain significant, yet they are variations upon a theme traced back tens of millions of years. To watch the sky and identify the asteroid that altered life's trajectory is to complete a circle. Descendants of small mammals now interpret geological history and cosmic motion, aware that their own presence is tied to events far beyond individual control. In that awareness rests connection rather than conquest, continuity rather than isolation, linking humanity to a lineage that once waited quietly in the shadow of extinction. Morning does not always arrive with spectacle. Often it begins as a subtle shift in light, almost imperceptible, before the landscape reveals itself in new tones. The first dawn after the age of dinosaurs unfolded in that manner, not as a triumphant announcement, but as a gradual brightening of possibility across a wounded planet. The impact that ended the Cretaceous was violent, yet the transformation that followed was restrained and patient. Forests regrew, rivers carved through altered terrain. In burrows and under cover of leaf litter, small mammals resumed their cycles of feeding and breeding. Nothing in that immediate moment suggested future supremacy. The world was quieter, altered, but not yet redefined. Change required time measured in millions of years. Lineages branched, some fading quickly, others persisting. Body sizes expanded in certain environments. Diets diversified. Habitats were tested and reoccupied. The absence of dinosaurs did not automatically confer dominance upon mammals. It opened space. Within that space, incremental advantages accumulated. Warm blood allowed activity during cooler intervals. Milk nourished young through vulnerable stages. Social bonds supported cooperative behavior. Cognitive growth encouraged learning and adjustment. Each trait, modest on its own, compounded across generations. Evolution moved without urgency, guided by selection acting upon variation within newly available niches. As epochs passed, survival gradually shifted toward influence. Mammals entered oceans and skies, roamed grasslands, and endured ice ages. Ecosystems reorganized around their presence. Predators and herbivores arose within their ranks, shaping vegetation and prey dynamics across continents. The dawn that began in shadow extended into afternoon light. Yet, even this expansion retained quiet origins. There was no single day when mammals assumed control, no clear boundary announcing completion. Dominance emerged as a byproduct of persistence. Traits that once ensured survival in marginal conditions proved adaptable to broader landscapes. Time, more than force, carried the lineage forward. Seen in this light, that first dawn never truly concluded. It continues in each birth, each adaptation to shifting climate, each incremental genetic change. The processes that followed the asteroid impact remain active, selecting and refining within present ecosystems. The morning after extinction becomes an enduring state of transition rather than a closed chapter. The meaning of that dawn rests not in conquest, but in continuity. Life did not vanish, it adjusted. Small bodies with unassuming traits responded to altered circumstances and over immense spans reshaped the biosphere. The pattern affirms that resilience often operates without spectacle. As this narrative settles, the pace slows. The light remains gentle, stretching across deep time. What began as faint glow in the aftermath of upheaval evolved into the world that surrounds us now. The dawn was quiet, unfolding step by step across tens of millions of years, and in its steady unfolding, it carries on.